These are some interesting times we're living in. From the onset of our arrival in this country, we've always been on the wrong side of social disparities, on the wrong side of income inequality, on the wrong side of injustice, on the wrong side of access to quality health, quality education. And now, in the precipice of this pandemic, the protests over the senseless killings of African Americans that has always been a part of our history here. And I think what's going on in this movement is phenomenal. But Alan, who will introduce himself here in a second, wrote an op-ed piece for the Sacramento Bee. In that opinion piece, he put forth the question, what are we going to do after the marching stops? Right? How does the African American community create a national agenda that will result on us being on the right side of justice, the right side of income quality, the right side of quality education, the right side of access to quality health care? Right? And so what are we going to do when the marching stops, this time around? Right? Because I think we have some momentum when we look at what's going on in Mississippi. And after all the years of trying by that state legislature, right, it's been going on for over 100 years, they have finally decided to bring down a flag that marks the underside of African American history in this country. That's getting done. So what else can we get done? So I'm going to lead in, let Alan introduce himself, let him cue up the piece he did for the Sacramento Bee on what do we do when the marching stops. And that's going to be the focus of this conversation that Alan and I will have today. Alan.
Thank you, Ron. Again, yes, my name is Alan Warren, and I am a product of a community in Sacramento called Del Paso Heights. Born and raised in Sacramento. And from the time I can remember, we've had these types of heightened emotional responses to very traumatic experiences and negative experiences as it relates to people of color, and in this particular case, African Americans. I have known people who have had family members shot and killed, who have had family members that have been mistreated at the hands of law enforcement. I myself have been pulled over by police, at gunpoint. In fact, me and my then girlfriend, who is now my wife, we were pulled over one time by 5 police cars at gunpoint. Wow. I think we were in our early 20s. And so, I like to reference reality, both historical reality and my personal reality as it relates to my experiences with people across culture, across race, across boundaries. And so the piece that you reference, When the Marching Stops, that I wrote, I wrote that piece really as a reflective piece, but also as somewhat of a statement about where things are in our society, in our culture, but then also, put the question forward as to really what are our objectives? What do we want?
Sure.
What does freedom look like?
Sure.
What does equality look like?
In action.
In action. It's not just words. We have a lot of emotion that we feel and we exhibit as it relates to the shootings, as it relates to injustices, in a lot of the numbers that show Black people disproportionately being negatively impacted by health, education, access to resources. And in some way, we all live it and we've experienced it. Some of us have managed to navigate through that better than others.
Sure.
You know, you and I believe, are exceptions. You know, I'm the first in my family to graduate from college.
Same with me.
And I have 7 sisters. Mm-hmm. All of them older. Mm-hmm. And so, so we have managed to, for whatever reason, figure out how to navigate. But I think in that space now we have a extra obligation to help others navigate.
I believe that as well.
You know, to really provide the benefit of what we know, what we've experienced, to show others how to, you know, as a way to make their way through this society that is disproportionately stacked against them. And so, you know, again, the question about where do we go from here really is not just put to black folks or white folks. It's a structural issue. And our country was based on a set of principles that we've not fully lived up to. All men being created equal. You know, equal justice under the law, right? And so I am hopeful because I think that there are enough good people and so many across culture that people recognize it's time to really link up to correct some of these past injustices. And not only that, people want to do that. They don't want to be saddled with these burdens into the future. They don't want I know a lot of white families that don't want their kids being saddled with these things that are left undone. Yeah. That their forefathers and foremothers may have had a role in. And they are now being forced to deal with these issues, you know, because they have been left undone. And it will continue to be an issue. This is not going to go away. You know, it's like a wound that a scab is kind of healed over it just a little bit, but all you got to do is just prick it, and there it is, a raw, gaping hole and wound that's still in society that we have to deal with in order to heal, you know, our institution of America, so that we can go forward together as one people.
And so, in your opinion, Alan, what does that deal with look like in action? And let me cue it up this way. We live in a society where simply because of skin color, there are some things coming at you that no one else has to deal with. In the height of this protest that we're going through currently, focus on the death of George Floyd. Last week, an African-American man walking down the street in Chattanooga, Tennessee, my hometown, right? His only issue that he was walking on the wrong side of the street. And in most cities, that's an infraction.
If that.
If that, right?
And why do a police officer have the time with all the other issues going on in the world, right, to go and pick out something like that?
The reason for the engagement, that he was simply walking on the wrong side of a country street. And the cameras identify within minutes he was in handcuffs on his back with 3 white cops beating him with their batons. Handcuffed on his back, been beat with batons. And his only issue that he was walking on the wrong side of the street. And so when we speak of a national agenda, right, one of the things we do understand, this is a country where the winner gets to make all the rules. Right?
In most countries it's that way. Right. In fact, if not all.
So if the winner gets to make the rules, right, what do the new winners need to look like so that what happened to this brother in Chattanooga, Tennessee, in the height of this protest, never occurs to any other human again, irrespective of his skin color, irrespective of of the sex. Right? Because one thing that we do know, if we use that as an example, we cannot legislate out racism in this country. We cannot legislate out the mentality of those three cops, because they had every reason in the middle of this protest to leave their police station that morning with a different mindset. And I believe that they did. I believe that they did. There's no way in the midst of this current social climate, political climate, everyone is engaged in this conversation about changing how we police communities of color. There's no way these white cops in Chattanooga, Tennessee did not leave that police station that morning in a different mindset than they were, say, a year ago. Mm-hmm. But something took over that we need to recognize. Right? And how do we legislate? How do we create an agenda that allows a man of any color to walk down the streets in his hometown and not be disenfranchised, right, by the emotional discontent of someone that doesn't look like him?
I get it. And, I think there are issues throughout this country and institutions that have a core of people that feel a certain way about other people, and in this case, people of color, that affects how they do their jobs. In law enforcement, it happens. I think it also happens in the financial industry. Perceptions about communities, perceptions about people of color, perceptions about character of those people.
And we do agree with what you said earlier. Mm-hmm. There are good people in every skin color, mm-hmm. Right?
Well, we know that. We know that. We've lived it. We've seen it. Every day we see lots of tremendous people across color, religion, culture, sex, sexual orientation, all of that. But we also know that there are some that are not so good, or even worse.
Absolutely.
Of the same, color, race, culture, the whole thing. And so my awakening, if you will, was really later than maybe some, because my parents kind of shielded me from the realities of color until I was like maybe around 12 or something. And the thing that exploded on me, that helped me understand some of the darkest histories of this country, was a movie called Roots.
Okay.
Right? Because before, it's like this thing
we were in high school when that movie came out.
You were. I was in junior high. Okay. So that means I might be a year or two older than you.
Come think of it, I was in junior high too.
So we about the same age, man.
Actually, we are the same age.
Are we?
1964.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. So I remember, even when that movie came out, some people saying we shouldn't watch it. It's too real. It was too raw. But I had no sense of the treatment of black people in this country at the hands of the people who controlled the country at that time, who were white. I had no sense of the reality and the brutality of racism, slavery, and it shocked me into this whole new process where I had to start trying to figure out how that made sense. And then I go to school and see white people and other people who are not the people I saw in the movie, and try to figure out, well, how does this all come together? And so, and furthermore, my mother would tell me stories about things that happened to her when she was a child as I got older. And she said, son, you need to know this because you're becoming a young man. You're going to be out more. And these are the kinds of things that I'm concerned for you about. And the police, same thing. Police issues was one of the things that, when you're out, you get your driver's license, son, you got to really be careful because you can be targeted, pulled over, that kind of thing.
And this is a conversation that's 40 years old now.
It's exactly 40 years
40
old.
years old.
Yesterday was my birthday.
Yeah.
And so
Happy belated birthday.
thank you, brother. Thank you. So trying to really put the history in proper context, recognizing that even out of slavery, there were white people that helped the Underground Railroad and helped people to freedom.
Absolutely.
And so that is an early lesson, and one of the healing components for me. It was because when I didn't have to distrust all white people.
Mm-hmm.
I distrust people based on their actions, or trust based on their actions.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't based on their color.
Correct.
So it was an early lesson for me. And then as I continued to mature and I got older, I had lots of examples. But there was also another movie that was really interesting to me. And it wasn't just until maybe about 5, 6, 7 years ago when I saw it, I had to go back again and put that in context. And that movie is called Buck and the Preacher.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I know
Okay?
the movie. Mm-hmm.
And so for those who don't know, Buck and the Preacher was really an extraordinary movie because you had a cowboy in Sidney Poitier
Mm-hmm.
that was a man's man, right? Stood up straight, could handle his gun, could ride a horse, knew the country, could talk to Indians, and could help emancipated blacks navigate their way from wherever they were, particularly in the South,
Mm-hmm.
out west or north, to a better existence, right? And then you had the police, who were put together at that time, made up of Ku Klux Klan members and others
Mm-hmm.
from the Confederacy, to force those free blacks back to the plantation to work. Because the farmers and the plantation owners, businesses could not function without free labor
Without the
or
free
very
labor.
cheap labor.
Right.
Okay? And so that is a very real scenario. And so you had early stages of law enforcement set up, right, to scare blacks and oftentimes kill them, rape, and pillage, to force them back to the plantations that had enslaved them to serve under now supposedly free, but not free, forced to work on those plantations for virtually nothing so that the plantation owner, former slave master, could continue to operate his business. So, so that was another real awakening for me. And so what I did was I took a step further and I Googled, which anybody can do, policing in America.
Mm-hmm.
How did policing in America start?
Mm-hmm.
I had written another little piece a couple years ago, and I mentioned in there that policing, if you Google it, was essentially started to control free blacks.
Absolutely.
Policing.
Absolutely.
And so, and now if policing was started with that as their basis, and the people who were police officers had free reign, kill, rape, pillage, whatever, and now you move into now the 21st century, stands to reason that some of that early foundation is still at the core, right? And you see it by way of all the statistics, the stops, the arrests, the incarcerations. And now you start to look at the whole system, the criminal justice system, not just policing, because the police do one thing. The system now protects the police officers.
Police officers.
Okay? And so, and takes those what were slaves, now supposedly free people, and then re-enslaves them through the system.
Because we do know that every mature system produces exactly what it's designed to produce. Policing is an extremely mature system. It produces what it's designed to produce. So when we look at the history of policing and transpose that on the history of education, public education started in New York City around 1901, 1902. And the reason for public education was that young people who were being put out of orphanages were transitioned to the streets of New York, and they were causing havoc, mayhem, crime, property value going down. So they instituted public education so that children in orphanages could be conditioned, prepared to enter society, go work in a factory, show up on time, put together a good day's work, make minimum wage, and go make a life for themselves in New York City so that they would not be a menace to society. So now you take the history of policing, right, which was there to police African Americans. Who do you think some of the young people coming out of orphanages were, right? And so now we have communities that we have here in the Sacramento region, such as Oak Park, Del Paso Heights, North Highlands, where there are no services. But what we do have is a strong arm of the police department, right, to provide punishment. In more cases than not, the punishment is handed down on those who are poorly educated. Because when Senator Kamala Harris was the district attorney in San Francisco County, she did a profile of the crime of murder. What she did, what we learned from that profile is that 94% of our murder victims and 94% of our murder suspects are undereducated, right? And so those are the individuals that the police institution is designed to punish, to police. It's the undereducated. Because one of the things, while you can describe what happened to you and your wife when you two were dating as teenagers, or not teenagers, as young adults, right? The reason that we do not find ourselves in those same instances for the most part, right, is that we went out and got educated.
Absolutely.
Education led to
Opportunity.
better zip codes, better opportunities, right? And not only that, it gave us the ability, if there is a less than perfect encounter with a police officer, right, it does not end in our death, right? Because we're operating with a different set of tools that someone who may be a high school dropout or someone that is marginally educated may not be equipped with the tools to get through that encounter.
Well, the other thing is that, education is also typically a safe space.
Yes.
So when I left high school and went to college, I'm transitioning from a relatively safe space to another relatively safe space. Those that don't are typically outside the walls, and now they're subject to all of the peer pressure, all of the other dangers that lurk in these communities, right? And so, just like sports, when I was in sports, it kept me away from drugs.
Absolutely.
It kept me away from the other things. And not only that, a lot of the people that were doing the drugs and the other bad things respected the fact that I was an athlete.
Sure.
Hey man, that's Wayne, he hitting that baseball, he doing this, that, and the other, And so in some ways, because as young people, we got all these ideas and thoughts about what we can do and how we can connect the dots of life. But we're really not mature enough. When you're in junior high and high school, you don't really understand the world you're living in. And we're not mature enough to make good decisions most of the time.
Sure.
And so the thing that sports and going to college did was it allowed us safe space, safe passage, if you will, into maturity. And now when you're 23, 24, 25, you're thinking a little bit different than you did at 17, 18, 19. So you're more mature.
Sure.
Right? So you've seen more, you've experienced more, you've been around people who want other things in life. You've been in this fertile environment. And so you've been able to strengthen your base, your core, your foundations. Your minds are more shaped now by positive experiences and thoughts about life as an adult, as opposed to seeing things and having to dodge, the pitfalls of some of our urban communities where we come from. But I want to go back to, again, the question about where we go from here and after the march and how we get there. And I think it starts with honesty.
Mm-hmm.
We have to be prepared to have honest discussions about race, about the history of the country, and the things that have been barriers to progress.
Let me ask you this real quick, Alan, not to break your train of thought.
Mm-hmm.
Heard Cornel West say on occasion.
Fantastic, man.
Absolutely.
Wonderful brother,
right.
man.
And from Sacramento.
Love him, man. He's from Sacramento,
right.
and absolutely love him.
Brother Cornel West said that the first indication of a democracy that is experiencing its demise is that when that democracy loses the ability to tell the truth about itself.
Sure.
So in your opinion, Alan, what are some of the things that we're not telling the truth about?
Well, let me just say Cornel West, in my opinion, is one of the most brilliant minds that we've produced. And I'm proud to say, he's from Sacramento. I've had the pleasure of meeting and speaking and knowing him. But if indeed what he said is correct, that means that America's demise started at its founding, right?
That's when the lie started.
Because it has compounded. And part of what we struggle with now is misinformation and miseducation of our own historical founding of our country, and people. We're trying to hold people accountable for something that they don't know happened. A lot of people are unfamiliar with all of the things that have happened to people in our culture. And it's not just that they don't know, it's been intentional by the system.
Sure.
And how they write the books, how they tell the news, how the conversations exist. Which is why it's so uncomfortable for people to have these discussions that we know we need to have that would help heal.
Absolutely.
And heal blacks and whites alike. Help heal our country. And these people always say, well, these conversations are uncomfortable. Well, why? Right? Like you had the coronavirus test. That was uncomfortable. We know we needed it.
But we had to do it.
There are things that we have to do to heal, and having honest dialogue with people who legitimately want to know the truth and want to make a better America, right? And it's really interesting how in a modern society with all the technology we have now, how people can still be ignorant to the history, the past. A lot of people didn't know, what happened in Tulsa, Oklahoma, where black businesses were burned and looted, and
Wall Street,
and all of that. And part of the other thing is that the system tells on itself. Also, when you can have people make an accusation about somebody, and then the dominoes start to fall. Just recently, the woman in New York called the police on the brother who asked her to put the mask on. She calls the police saying he's threatening her. I mean, to me, that's the system telling on itself. And now you take that back to Tulsa, where another woman, white woman, said that a black man raped her. Now, we don't know if that's true or not, and so I'm not passing judgment on that. But that was the cause for tens and hundreds of millions of dollars of productivity, of businesses, of jobs, of livelihoods, and of lives and deaths that took place because of what was supposedly said. Now,
and no one brought to justice.
So, I mean, in a perfect world, somebody commits a crime, then that person is judged, right, and dealt with. But now to go and burn a whole community, so that suggests that there was a lot more to,
Absolutely.
That than just this accusation of a.
It may have been the spark, but the fuel was there, right?
But even the spark and the fuel, does it still justify all the other things that happened to people who had no association to what this original accusation? And we've seen that time again, and so I know by being a business person, there's a lot of the challenges and pitfalls that we have to try to navigate in order to be successful. I've experienced some of that myself and understand it. I also know, as an elected official, how difficult it is to try to help bring resources and to healing into these communities that need it and have been neglected, because I'm also serve as an elected official, and what it says to me is that the priorities are our priorities are not in alignment with the system. Our priorities are not in line with most elected officials, because if it was, these changes would have taken place, and irrespective of their color, right? Irrespective of their color, we have people, just like we know in the black culture, black race, the white race, excellent, wonderful people, but we know there's some that are not. We know that if you're a politician, some of them may fight for one set of principles. Other ones, man, they like the status quo. Why? Because it protects them in their space.
It serves them.
It's about them and their priorities. It speaks to their priorities.
And it goes back to the...
Why wouldn't it be, let me just say this, why wouldn't it be, you could have a black Republican and a black Democrat. Why wouldn't they have shared concerns and experiences that would help them work together on these issues that we know are systemic, that we know are generational and intentional? Why would one politician be raising his hand and ready to charge and fight the system and constructively fight, and the other one is comfortable with the status quo, comfortable with the minimal progress, if any, that's being made in these generational problems, and which we have all the statistics: education, criminal justice system, access to capital, right? Even voter suppression, voter rights. Even now in the year 2020, we still have voter suppression. This is a democracy. We promote people to express their political opinions, to vote, and yet we got part of the institution that's saying, no, we don't want everybody to vote.
Let me throw this out there, Alan. You're an elected official. You mentioned that this is a democracy, and this is where you and I would depart slightly. I don't believe this is a true democracy. I believe America is an oligarchy. There are 5 to 6 families, right, that are in such power, right? America is ran by that collective oligarchy that is camouflaged as a democracy, and that's why I hear you. I think one of the departures from why one wants to maintain the status quo and one wants to move forward, it's where we believe we come into this failed democratic experiment, right? Even if the original intent was to make this a true democracy. A true democracy is where there are rules that benefit everyone as much as they benefit, rules that benefit everyone as much as they benefit anyone, right? And we know we do not have that, because there are rules put in place by the winners that do not benefit everyone as much as they benefit anyone, right?
Sure.
But every rule that we have in American society, right, to the degree that it's possible, they benefit the oligarchy. So as an elected official, and in these last few minutes, dialing down into what does a national agenda look like in action? Right? What are some of the things that a winner of a political race in the Sacramento region, in California, and other parts of this country, what are some of the rules that can be put in place by winners, right? Now, we've talked about education. We've talked about, the history of policing. Is this a true democracy? What is possible? And if it is possible, who is it possible for? Right? And if you could say one thing, project one idea on what the African American community, communities of color, the disenfranchised in this country, irrespective of race and color and national creed, what is that one agenda that you would put out there and say, you know what, if we could do this one thing, it would make some changes that would be positive.
Sure.
And it would be a stepping stone to other smart public policy.
Well, I believe, having an agreed upon set of principles, I think, is important. But even in this soup bowl of people, of ideas, of culture in America, America is still an extraordinary country.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And I've traveled extensively throughout the world. America has allowed people like you, me, and others, Cornel West and others that have gone on. Now, should there have been more? Could there have been more? Absolutely. But in some ways, the structure of our country produces certain things that have to be better in ways of solving problems that creates a person who, regardless of the challenge, can navigate. You know what I mean? And my point is, the harder it is to make it, those that kind of get through that situation are unique in some, whatever it is, innate, uh, uh, people they've met that have helped them along the way, and whatever it took for them to kind of marshal themselves through this system has created a group of people who are a little bit maybe I want to say like in a race, a little bit faster than some of the others. Mm-hmm. My point though in that is saying that the key is to get those people and have those people have shared goals about how we now create an environment that can lift other people. Mm-hmm. And all of that is about, in my opinion, it's about the big picture, being selfless, humility, about understanding why it's important for us to do the work that we do. And all of those things, in my opinion, can be enhanced and helping to deal with a lot of the past issues, past pains, and current struggles by way of understanding the oppression of the people, black people in this case, and a mechanism to give them reparative justice. So some form of reparations. Okay? And what I mean by that, maybe that is broad enough, could be done quick enough, that would help balance out the playing field in a way that more people can make it across the finish line, more people can make it to the graduation, more people can make it to a longer lifespan, more people make it to a particular place in life that can then still reach back and help others too. And
So what you're referencing is that 40 acres in a mule type of reparation.
that was one form of it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is really the big question of today. I think because of what's going to come out of this, all these marches and struggles, I think people are going to recognize, yes, absolutely, the injustices that black people have faced have been unconscionable, and this country owes black people. And then so I don't think that question has to be continually asked. I think that question has already been answered. It's going to be, okay, how do we now repair the harm that was done to these generations of black people? And I think, that is going to be the major singular issue that will elevate this country. When you elevate black people, you elevate this country, and,
Absolutely.
And it helps across the board. Some people don't see it that way, and so we have to go through the process. But I think that is going to be the issue that helps people and helps this country progress to a place where we don't have to continually look back and point to all these things that were put in place to harm and to hold back, without giving black people adequate resource to progress forward and make up some of that lost ground. And so I think that's going to be it's going to be a challenge, but I think that's going to be the singular issue that helps us to get to where this country really starts to heal.
So if you take that, Alan, and I want 100% on board the reparation, but we still have that exists in our communities. Schools such as Martin Luther King Jr. High School in Del Paso Heights, where the level of proficiency in math and the language arts for students of color is still less than 10%. And so what does a person do, right, that's poorly educated, fractured due to the social constructs that they're forced to live through? To me, that national agenda, while it goes out as a spider vein, at some point we have to park our agenda on the quality of education. Because as we spoke of earlier, you and I here, we're having this conversation only because of our education.
Yeah.
And so how do we drive a community to care about education enough to where if we were ever to receive proper reparation, right? Yeah. That we simply would not go to waste. Because a good friend of yours, in one of his stand-ups, Cedric the Entertainer, said, you know what? If we give black folks reparation, all we're going to do is make Cadillac #1 dealership in the country, right? While we can joke about that, there's a serious side of that.
Yeah, and education is a huge component, but education is part of, in my opinion, is part of the reparations.
Okay,
it has to be.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, I mean, there's an idea about, people have ideas about reparations being just money. Black folks get money and then they run off and do this, that, and the other. Reparations has to be well thought out, well intended, very purposeful, and then we should see the results. We track it, and the results should, so there may be phases of reparations. Not just one.
Yeah, I like that.
One big chunk of money. I mean, there could be phases to this process. So I think it's really important, though, that we understand that artificially black folks have been placed in this place. Right? Artificially, they've been held back. Artificially, blacks couldn't play baseball until 1940s. Artificially, blacks weren't quarterbacks in the NFL till like the 60s or the 70s, right? All these things were artificial barriers, man. And then once it starts happening, not only could they play, we could excel at whatever. Mathematics, right. Engineering, medicine.
Because there's a level of exceptionalism in us that's undeniable.
Golf, swimming,
right.
Things that blacks didn't, were not noted for doing. They were only not noted for doing because they didn't have an opportunity to do it. And so, I think this whole process is being, worked through, and ultimately, I think we will get to a place. I'm hopeful we'll get to a place where we understand that we have to put in place, and I call it reparative justice. We have to put in place the vehicles that's going to allow the progress to take place and the healing to take place. And so whatever that is, maybe there's smarter people than me or you or anybody else who can come up with the right set of approaches, but it's going to have to be, I think, different tools than we've been using. And so
I like that, different tools. So let me cue this last piece up this way. You, myself, others, we received this invitation in the mail.
Yes.
And it's an invitation to a competition to determine who's the greatest. You accept the invitation, I accept it, everyone we know accepted. We see some of our friends, some of our colleagues, some of the people in our network over the years, they're there. We also see a zebra, a donkey, a wild boar, a fish in a bowl, a group of chimpanzees, all the God's creatures show up, right? Because everyone has a claim to greatness, correct? Because we're all great at something. There's something in all of us that says that we are great.
Okay.
And so we all line up, we're looking, man, say, we wonder what the test is. Well, okay. So the exam proctor finally comes out, welcomes everyone to this competition to determine who's the greatest. An exam proctor says today's test is tree climbing, right? Right. And so we know the chimpanzee, right, has a hand up on everybody.
Yeah.
So they run up the tree, they come down, we're the greatest. The poor fish in the bowl never had a chance. Yeah. And we're sitting here looking, man, what the? So I take that scenario, and drive it into something that I have long subscribed to. It's the test that determines if we're great. It's the test that we subject ourselves to, right? And so when you say the tools, right, I believe that one of the national agendas, one of those items has to be that we have to create an instrument or tool by which communities that are currently disenfranchised begin to judge themselves by, right? Because we all want to believe that we're great. We all need to have some successes in our lives. And if African Americans continue to compare themselves to others and subject themselves to a test, right? We're not tree climbers.
That's not designed for
right?
That. Yeah.
And if the test is tree climbing, right, that test isn't designed for us because we're not tree climbers, right? And so can we create our own test, right, that determines that we are the greatest, because you and I are living examples, right? And there are many examples that there is amazing exceptionalism in African American and black skin, right?
Absolutely.
One of the issues is we subject ourselves to the wrong test, and we come back defeated.
Absolutely. Absolutely, I agree. Hey man, it's been a pleasure.
It's been great.
Look forward to continuing the discussion.